Two of the most extreme cases of violence in the animal food industry are the production of dairy products and the production of eggs. We usually think that dairy and egg production is less cruel to animals than killing them for meat. I think, though, that it takes an enormous amount of violence and cruelty to produce dairy products and eggs. Female cows, for example, are not only severely confined, but their babies are stolen and they are repeatedly raped. Artificially inseminated is what we say euphemistically, but it's done on what operators call a rape rack, and they're forcibly impregnated by a human hand, shoving a sperm gun. After 9 months, they give birth, and their baby is immediately stolen, causing enormous anguish to both. And while they're lactating for their calf that was stolen, they're immediately impregnated again. The milk is also, of course, stolen from them, and they are forced to give much more milk than they normally would. A cow would only give from 10 to 30 pounds of milk per day in the wild, at the most, and that would only be for several months. But on a modern dairy, they're forced to give milk for a much longer time, almost the entire time that they're pregnant with the next calf. And not only that, they're manipulated to secrete much more milk, about 100 to 120 pounds of milk every day. There are basically two methods used to achieve this unnaturally high output. One is through hormone manipulation, giving them lactogenic hormones of various kinds, and the other one is by forcing them to eat cholesterol, which increases their milk production. The only way you can get a cow to eat cholesterol does not exist in plant foods, is to make the cow into a carnivore. Basically, dairy cows are fed the flesh and meat byproducts of pigs, chickens, turkeys, and fish. Until recently, they were fed the flesh of other cows also, perhaps even of their own babies, until the outbreak of mad cow disease, which is a direct result of such practices. Mad cow disease sprang up because of feeding cows to cows, and the FDA told dairy operators they shouldn't do that anymore. It is such a mad agricultural practice to make these poor animals not only into carnivores but into cannibals. But that's exactly what went on dairy farms for years, and it still goes on to this day that they're forced to be carnivores. After 4 or 5 years, these cows, who would normally live 25 years in the wild, are totally worn out, and they're sent off to slaughter. Slaughter, by the way, is an extremely painful and terrifying procedure for these animals. They're only stunned, they're not actually killed directly before their necks are stabbed and they're bled, and their bodies are cut apart. So very often they're cut apart and skinned while they're still conscious. It's totally unconscionable for us to do this today, but it's happening by the millions and millions of animals. They are cut apart and skinned while they're still fully conscious in slaughter plants to make the hamburgers and hot dogs we just eat without thinking. The suffering, the sheer physical and mental cruelty that these creatures endure is beyond our wildest imaginings. It's sheer torture, really. The same is true with the hens we confine in egg production operations, except that they suffer even more severe confinement and abuse than cows. They're debeaked and crammed into cages so tightly they can barely move, in dark warehouses in ammonia-drenched air where their eggs are stolen from them, and after a couple of years of this extreme misery, they're tossed into transport cages and slaughtered for chicken soup and baby food. Dairy and egg production are founded upon the domination of the feminine and on violence against the feminine. The most sacred and precious functions of life, I think, are giving birth and nurturing babies and nurturing the young offspring with milk. These are such sacred and beautiful and tender, positive, life-giving functions of females, and they are dominated and exploited through dairy and egg production to an unprecedented degree. This domination of the feminine is at the heart of the malaise that our culture faces. The violence against women starts with the violence against the female dairy cows and chickens that we eat every day on our plates, as eggs, cheese, ice cream, hamburgers, and chicken soup. Dairy and egg production require a mentality that sees the female body as just a thing, seeing women as objects to be used sexually, and seeing female cows, chickens, pigs, and turkeys as objects to be used gastronomically and financially are very closely related. We have to meditate on these things and feel into the connections with our heart in order to understand them. These aren't really things that I can ever convince anybody of with mere words. All I can do is point out what we're doing and ignoring and denying, and ask some questions. How can we expect to live in peace while we're dominating sensitive female animals and the feminine aspect of ourselves so brutally? The feminine aspect is linked with intuition, with feelings, with knowings that come to the heart. Veganism as compassionate living, as a refusal of violence, as a refusal to cooperate with the unnecessary violence in the world, is a choice that we make with our heart. Until we make this choice with our heart, we'll continue to be part of the violence. We'll continue to be perpetrators of violence in our culture, and to be contributors to the cultural violence that erupts as poverty, terrorism, and war. We won't ever be able to change this as a culture as long as we exploit and kill animals for food. So it's really about opening up to the divine feminine, that which is sacred and gentle and wise within us, and that sees the connections that are usually hidden and invisible. It's also about opening to our inner divine masculine, which is protective and compassionate and creative. That has also been repressed by our brutality against animals. Living in harmony with all life means walking our talk and letting our daily lives and actions be living prayers for peace. Kindness and world peace begin on our plates. This is true not just for the physical and psychological reasons I've discussed, but for metaphysical reasons as well. Through the book I discuss the metaphysics of food, which is being able to see that not only are we eating this thing that looks like a piece of flesh or cheese or an egg, but also that we're eating violence, and the vibrations of the foods we eat affect us. What we are and what all life is energy, and energy is vibratory. We know now through science what spiritual traditions have said for centuries, which is that matter is an aspect of energy and is a manifestation of consciousness, and that consciousness and spirit are primary. So when we eat of consciousness that is so enraged and saddened and miserable and afraid, the vibrations that we're bringing into our bodies are vibrations of horror and fear and violence. And these are not good vibrations to bring in. It's no wonder we're attracted to violent movies, violent video games, violent politics, and violent entertainment. We can't help it because we're eating it every single day.